The shot split the afternoon silence like a thunderclap from a cloudless sky. Every head on the observation deck snapped toward Lane 7, the restricted corridor reserved for the impossible shot qualification, a 1,400-yard gauntlet that had broken the confidence of more elite operators than anyone cared to count. No one had attempted that lane in 3 weeks. No one had authorization to even touch the equipment staged there. Yet the electronic scoreboard flickered to life, its digital display casting an orange glow across the stunned faces of 25 Navy SEALs mid-cycle through their advanced sniper certification. Bull's eye, dead center. Chief Petty Officer Brick Lawson lowered his spotting scope, the veins in his neck already pulsing with barely contained fury. At 6'3" with shoulders that seemed to strain against the fabric of his tactical vest, Brick commanded attention simply by existing in a space. He had earned his reputation as the most demanding instructor at Joint Sniper Training Center through 12 years of service and a personality that treated weakness like a personal insult. What the hell was that? His voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a blade. Who authorized that shot? The SEALs exchanged glances, each man's expression a mirror of confusion and curiosity. Lieutenant Commander Ivory Ashford emerged from the climate-controlled comfort of the administration office, her perfectly pressed uniform a stark contrast to the dust and sweat of the training ground. She surveyed the scene with the cold calculation of someone who had climbed the ranks by never allowing emotion to cloud her judgment. I heard a discharge from the restricted lane. Her eyes swept across the assembled operators, cataloging faces and calculating possibilities. Someone want to explain why my afternoon just got complicated? Brick's jaw tightened. I asked a question. Who took that shot? Silence stretched across the shooting range like a held breath. Then movement caught the corner of his eye, a small figure detaching itself from the shadow of the armory building 50 yards away. The woman who emerged walked without hurry, her faded uniform marking her as nothing more than support staff. The invisible backbone that kept facilities functioning while warriors trained. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her frame slight enough that the Barrett M82A1 rifle she carried should have bent her spine. Instead, she held it like an extension of herself, the 14-kilogram weapon balanced with an ease that seemed almost casual. Her? Seaman Flynn Caldwell snorted, his phone already in hand, recording the moment for what he assumed would become barracks entertainment. The armory clerk? You have got to be kidding me. Hazel Whitmore set the rifle on the inspection table without ceremony, her gray eyes moving across the crowd before settling on the still-glowing scoreboard. She said nothing. Her face revealed nothing. In the hierarchy of military presence, she registered as background noise, the kind of person your gaze slides past without engaging. Brick crossed the distance between them in 4 aggressive strides, his shadow falling across her like a threat made physical. You think you can just walk onto my range and play soldier, sweetheart? The endearment dripped with contempt. Hazel's gaze lifted to meet his, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered in those pale gray depths. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank compliance of someone accustomed to being overlooked. Lucky shot, Brick continued, leaning closer until his breath stirred the loose strands of hair near her temple. Or you just violated about 15 regulations regarding unauthorized weapons discharge. Either way, you're in a world of trouble. She remained silent. Petty Officer First Class Archer Donnelly approached the inspection table, his technical expertise evident in the methodical way he examined the Barrett. He ran his fingers along the barrel, checking temperature, then brought his nose close to the action. Weapon's been fired recently, still warm. He turned toward Hazel with an expression that mixed suspicion with genuine curiosity. You even know how to field strip this thing? Because if you damaged government property pretending to be something you're not, that paperwork's going to bury you. Hazel reached for the rifle without asking permission. Her hands moved in a blur of practiced motion, clearing the chamber with a speed that made Archer's eyebrows climb toward his hairline. 3 seconds, maybe less, the kind of efficiency that came from repetition, measured in thousands, not dozens. Flynn's camera was still rolling. Oh, this is gold. Wait till the guys see this. The cleaning lady thinks she's Chris Kyle. From the canteen positioned at the edge of the range, Master Sergeant Otis Brennan paused in his eternal task of polishing glassware. At 67, with a face weathered by decades of service and eyes that had seen things he would never discuss, Otis had become a fixture of the training center since his retirement 5 years ago. He ran the small refreshment stand as a way to stay connected to the world that had defined him. Now those knowing eyes fixed on the scene unfolding near Lane 7, and something in his expression shifted from casual interest to quiet concern. Senior Chief Gaston Mercer emerged from the range office, his clipboard clutched like a shield against the chaos threatening his carefully scheduled afternoon. 15 years in special operations had taught him to value order above almost everything else, and unexpected gunfire from restricted lanes did not fit his definition of order. What exactly is happening here? I'm trying to run a professional training facility, not a circus. His gaze swept the crowd before landing on Hazel. You, Armory staff. Explain yourself. Hazel met his stare without flinching. I took the shot, Senior Chief. Obviously. Gaston's tone could have frozen water at 50 paces. The question is why, and under whose authority, and how someone with your clearance level gained access to restricted equipment. The lane was unoccupied. The weapon needed function testing after maintenance. Function testing. Gaston repeated the words as if they were spoken in a foreign language. At 1,400 yards, on the qualification target. The target was already set, Brick laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Unbelievable. She thinks we're stupid enough to buy that. I don't think anything, Hazel replied, her voice flat. I'm stating what happened. Lieutenant Commander Ivory Ashford had been watching the exchange with the patience of a predator assessing prey. Now, she stepped forward, her presence immediately shifting the dynamic. Officers commanded deference by rank alone, and Ivory had spent her career learning to weaponize that authority. Honey, let me explain something to you. Her smile held all the warmth of a February morning in Alaska. The Armory is that direction. This area is for qualified operators. The big boys' playground, if you will. She gestured dismissively toward the equipment storage building. Run along now. Leave the shooting to people who actually know what they're doing. Hazel's gaze didn't waver. With respect, ma'am, the shot speaks for itself. The temperature on the observation deck seemed to drop several degrees. Excuse me? Ivory's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched with dangerous precision. Did our armory clerk just talk back to a lieutenant commander? I stated a fact. The scoreboard confirms accuracy. One lucky shot, Gaston interjected, his patience clearly eroding, doesn't make you a sniper. I've seen flukes before. Atmospheric conditions, mechanical advantage, pure random chance. It happens. He waved his hand in dismissal. Get back to your duties. We have actual training to conduct. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been judged by your appearance? Looked down upon because people couldn't see your true worth? If this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next to this quiet armory clerk will completely flip the script. Trust me, you don't want to miss the moment when everything changes. Subscribe and let's keep going. Hazel turned to leave, but Brick moved to block her path, his considerable bulk forming an effective barrier. The message was clear without words. This wasn't over until he decided it was over. Not so fast. He pulled a single round from his vest pocket, holding it between thumb and forefinger, like an accusation. I want to see that lucky shot one more time. Prove it wasn't a fluke. He pressed the ammunition into her palm, his grip lingering just long enough to communicate threat. Or admit you got lucky and apologize for wasting everyone's time. Gunnery Sergeant Fern Delgado had been observing from her position near the Marine Liaison Station. As one of the few female instructors at the joint facility, she had developed a finely tuned sense for situations that carried undercurrents most men missed entirely. Something about the armory clerk nagged at her, a disconnect between appearance and essence that she couldn't quite articulate. The way the woman stood, perhaps, weight balanced, shoulders relaxed but ready, eyes that moved in patterns suggesting threat assessment rather than nervous scanning. This feels wrong, Fern murmured to no one in particular. Lieutenant Silas Hartwell, the range safety officer whose primary responsibility involved preventing exactly this kind of irregular situation, stepped forward with a clipboard of regulations. This is highly improper. She's not authorized for live fire exercises. The liability alone, consider it a demonstration, Ivory interrupted smoothly. I'm curious to see what happens when luck runs out. The crowd had grown. Word traveled fast on military installations, and the prospect of watching support staff embarrass themselves held universal appeal. 30 personnel now lined the observation deck, phones discreetly recording what promised to be either comedy or controversy. Hazel looked at the round in her palm, then at the sea of expectant faces surrounding her. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not fear, not anger, something that resembled calculation filtered through resignation. She walked to lane 7. The shooting mat waited where she had left it, still bearing the impression of her previous position. The Barrett remained on the inspection table, cleared and safe, its scope catching afternoon sunlight in a way that made the precision optics gleam like a promise. Hazel loaded the single round with movements that flowed rather than jerked, each action connecting seamlessly to the next. She checked the wind flags scattered across the range, but her primary attention seemed focused on something else entirely. Her eyes tracked dust particles drifting through the air, calculating wind speed and direction through observation methods that didn't appear in any official manual. Chief Warrant Officer Caleb Rourke, the facility's senior weapons specialist, noticed her grip as she settled into position. "That's interesting," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The way she cradled the rifle, the angle of her cheek against the stock, the distribution of her weight. None of it matched the standard techniques taught to support personnel. Brick and Archer exchanged smirks of anticipation. $100 says she misses, Brick offered. 200 says she doesn't even know how to use the scope properly, Archer countered. Hazel's breathing changed, slowed, deepened. The rhythm of someone who had fired not hundreds, but thousands of rounds, who had learned to synchronize heartbeat and trigger pull until they became a single coordinated action. The range fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared its thunder across the desert landscape, and 1,400 yards away, the target's center mass erupted in confirmation. Bull's eye, dead center, again. That's impossible. Archer snatched the spotting scope from its mount, pressing his eye to the lens with desperate intensity. The wind shifted during flight. I watched it. The flags moved. She should have been at least 3 inches off target. She compensated, Fern said quietly. Adjusted for the shift before it happened? That's not compensation. Brick's voice had lost some of its swagger. That's prediction. That's knowing what the wind's gonna do before it does it. Hazel rose from the mat, dusting off her knees with the same casual efficiency she had shown throughout. Her face remained impassive, but something in her bearing had subtly changed. The deference wasn't quite as convincing as before. Gaston stared at the scoreboard, then at the woman, then back at the scoreboard. 15 years of experience told him what he had just witnessed was extraordinary. 15 years of pride refused to acknowledge it. Impressive, he admitted grudgingly, but anyone can hit a stationary target, even twice. Real snipers operate under pressure. Archer seized the opening. Let's see her do it on the move. He moved to the range control panel, fingers hovering over the activation sequence for the mobile target system. Random patterns, variable speed, the qualification standard for special operations certification. It wasn't a suggestion. The crowd leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Hazel glanced at the target array, then at Archer, then at the expectant faces surrounding her. She could have refused, should have refused. Every regulation supported walking away. Instead, she reached for more ammunition. The shooting range's electronic scoring system displayed real-time data on tablets mounted at each station. These military-grade devices had been built to withstand dust, heat, and the constant vibration of nearby weapons discharge. Ruggedized technology designed for forward observers in combat zones, capable of calculating wind speed, humidity, and trajectory adjustments with precision that civilian equipment simply could not match. Every serious shooter at the facility knew the truth. Accurate data meant the difference between a hit and a miss, between mission success and body bags. Hazel settled back into position as Archer activated the mobile target system. 5 targets began their unpredictable dance across the range, moving at varying speeds along randomized paths. 3 shots, 3 kills. The targets dropped in sequence so rapid that spectators struggled to track which had fallen first. Fern Delgado exhaled slowly. Mother of mercy, that's not luck. That's not training. That's something else entirely. The silence that followed carried a different quality than before. Less mockery. More uncertainty. Ivory Ashford had not become a lieutenant commander by accepting defeat gracefully. She retrieved a tactical map from the range office, spreading it across the inspection table with deliberate ceremony. Adequate marksmanship, she conceded, the word adequate delivered like an insult. But shooting at targets doesn't make someone a sniper. Real operators make tactical decisions under pressure. They read terrain. They plan approaches and escapes. She tapped at the map with a manicured fingernail. Calculate a shot from this position. Factor in elevation, wind corridor, and extraction route. Show me you understand the difference between pulling a trigger and completing a mission. The challenge hung in the air, thick with implication. This wasn't about marksmanship anymore. This was about putting the armory clerk back in her place. Hazel approached the map. Her eyes moved across the terrain features for perhaps 5 seconds. Then her hand reached for the marking pen, and she began to annotate. Primary position here. A small X appeared on an elevated ridge offering concealment and clear sight lines. Secondary fallback here. Another mark, positioned to allow rapid displacement if the primary was compromised. Extraction point here. A third notation, indicating a route that avoided obvious choke points while maximizing cover. The primary offers 1,200-yard engagement range with natural concealment from the rock formation. The secondary adds another 200 yards but sacrifices stability. The extraction uses the dry riverbed to mask movement during egress. Her voice remained flat, clinical, utterly devoid of emotion. Wind corridor runs southwest to northeast at this elevation, approximately 8 to 12 knots based on seasonal patterns. Humidity will be lower in morning hours, affecting bullet drop by roughly 0.3 inches at maximum range. Gaston grabbed the map, his eyes scanning the annotations with growing disbelief. These weren't textbook solutions. These weren't classroom theories regurgitated by someone who had memorized the manual. These were the answers of an operator who had planned and executed real missions, who understood terrain because lives had depended on that understanding. Where did you learn this? The question escaped before he could stop it. Hazel met his gaze. On the job. Archer had been running a background check on his tablet, searching for anything that might explain the inexplicable. Got something, he announced, relief evident in his voice. Says here she was a marksmanship instructor at Quantico 5 years ago. That explains the shooting. The tension in the crowd eased slightly. Mystery solved. The armory clerk had actual training. Unusual for support staff, but not impossible. But Fern wasn't satisfied. Quantico instructors don't shoot like that, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I've trained with their best. They're good, really good. But this? She shook her head. This is different. Okay, things are getting intense. But here's the thing. We're just scratching the surface. The real revelation is coming, and it's bigger than anyone expects. If you're hooked like I am, smash that like button and drop a comment. What do you think her secret is? Let's see who guesses right. Hazel reached for a cloth to wipe down the Barrett, and her sleeve rode up her forearm, exposing a scar that ran from her wrist nearly to her elbow. The tissue was pale and puckered, the distinctive pattern of shrapnel damage rather than surgical incision. Corpsman Iris Thorne noticed immediately. Medical personnel developed an eye for injury types, and what she saw on the armory clerk's arm didn't match any industrial accident or training mishap. That was combat trauma, the signature of an IED or fragmentation dart, the kind of wound earned in place where paperwork was the least of your concerns. That scar, Iris said quietly to Dahlia Vance, the medic on duty, that's not from here, that's from somewhere hot. Brick had noticed too. His confrontational approach shifted slightly, uncertainty creeping into his aggressive stance. The scar suggested a story he hadn't anticipated, complications to the simple narrative of support staff overstepping boundaries. But admitting doubt meant admitting he had been wrong, and Brick Lawson did not do wrong. All right, so you've got some training, he acknowledged, the concession costing him visibly. Doesn't mean you belong on this range. Doesn't mean you've earned the right to shoot alongside actual operators. He stepped closer, using his physical size to compensate for his wavering certainty. In real combat, people shoot back. Targets don't fall down and stay down. They move. They hide. They try to kill you before you kill them. He shoved her shoulder, a gesture designed to provoke. Hazel didn't retreat, didn't flinch. Her eyes met his with an absolute stillness that seemed fundamentally wrong for someone in her supposed position. Most people, confronted by an aggressive superior twice their size, showed some reaction. Fear, anger, submission. Hazel showed nothing. The emptiness behind those gray eyes carried the quality of someone who had faced things that made Brick Lawson seem trivial by comparison. You finished? She asked. The question should have sounded meek. Instead, it landed like a challenge. Flynn Caldwell, still recording, sensed an opportunity to ingratiate himself with the senior personnel. He stepped forward with the eager malice of someone who hadn't learned that cruelty usually returns to its source. Maybe we should check her locker, he suggested. Support staff sneaking onto restricted ranges, showing off skills they shouldn't have. Seems suspicious to me. Maybe she's got other secrets she's hiding. The suggestion found traction. Gaston nodded curtly. Not an unreasonable precaution, given the irregularities. 20 minutes later, Flynn returned with a wooden box that he clearly considered a trophy. He set it on the inspection table with theatrical flourish, lifting the lid to reveal its contents. "Personal weapons," he announced triumphantly, "in a military facility. Pretty sure that's against about 50 regulations." Inside the box lay a custom pistol, its modifications suggesting professional-grade work rather than amateur tinkering. Beneath it rested an old compass, its brass case worn smooth by years of handling, and partially hidden beneath a folded cloth, the corner of a photograph was visible. Well, Ivory's satisfaction was palpable. Looks like someone's been keeping secrets. Unauthorized weapons on base. That's not just a reprimand, that's potentially criminal. Gaston glanced at the insurance paperwork stacked on his desk nearby. Specialized coverage for military contractors and veterans transitioning to civilian careers had become standard practice. The premium plans offering benefits that regular policies couldn't match. Coverage for high-risk training exercises. Disability riders for service-related injuries. Guaranteed acceptance regardless of deployment history. For people in this line of work, proper financial protection wasn't just advisable, it was survival planning. He pushed the thought aside and focused on the box. Hazel's gaze had fixed on the photograph, and for the first time since this confrontation began, genuine emotion flickered across her features. Pain, loss, something that defied easy categorization. Then it was gone, locked away behind walls that had clearly been built long ago. Captain Hugo Castellano chose that moment to arrive. His black SUV had been parked outside the range for several minutes, but he had waited to make his entrance until the situation had developed sufficiently. Pentagon liaisons learned patience as a professional requirement. "I'm looking for someone," he announced, striding through the crowd with the confidence of someone who outranked everyone present. A woman matching a certain description was reported at this facility. Every eye turned toward Hazel. Ivory's smile could have cut glass. "Captain, I believe we may have found your person, along with unauthorized weapons and a complete disregard for protocol." Hugo surveyed the scene, his attention lingering on the wooden box before moving to Hazel herself. Something unreadable passed across his face. Then he walked past her without a second glance, heading toward the administration building. "Carry on. I'll make my inquiries through proper channels." The anticlimactic moment left confusion in its wake. If the Pentagon was looking for the armory clerk, why hadn't the captain acknowledged her presence? "False alarm, I suppose," Archer muttered. But Fern noticed that Hugo had paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder, with an expression that suggested the story was far from over. Gaston's phone buzzed with an incoming message. His face, already stern, hardened into something approaching granite. "The Admiral's coming," he announced. "Inspection in 30 minutes. Everything needs to be squared away. Now." The news sent a ripple of controlled panic through the assembled personnel. Admiral inspections were career-defining events. The difference between perfect presentation and minor oversight could mean the difference between promotion and stagnation. "Get this mess cleaned up," Gaston ordered, gesturing at the inspection table and its incriminating contents. "We'll deal with the armory clerk situation after the Admiral leaves." But Lieutenant Silas Hartwell had been running his own investigation. Something about the situation didn't add up, and curiosity had driven him to access the personnel database. "That's strange," he murmured, staring at his tablet screen. "What?" Fern approached, looking over his shoulder. "Her file. I searched for Hazel Whitmore, and the system kicked back an access restriction. Level 5 clearance required." "Level 5? Fern's eyebrows climbed. "That's intelligence community level. Counterterrorism, classified operations." "Exactly." Silas met her eyes. "Why would an armory clerk need level 5 protection on her personnel file?" Sergeant First Class Ezra Blackwood entered the range area at that moment, his Army Ranger insignia marking him as the liaison from the Joint Operations Command. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in military environments. His attention scattered across the various activities until it landed on one specific person. He stopped mid-stride, froze. The color drained from his face with a speed that suggested sudden illness or profound shock. Hazel had noticed him too. Their eyes met across 30 feet of dusty range floor, And in that brief contact, something passed between them: recognition, history, complicated emotions that neither seemed prepared to acknowledge publicly. Ezra recovered first, forcing his feet to move again, but his trajectory had shifted. He angled away from Hazel, heading toward the administrative building with sudden urgent purpose. Fern caught the exchange. "You know her?" "No." The denial came too quickly. "Never seen her before." His hands were shaking. Petty Officer Second Class Clover Nguyen, the young armorer trainee who had been shadowing Hazel for the past month, rushed toward the confrontation with obvious distress. "Ma'am," she said breathlessly, addressing Hazel, "they found something in your locker. Chief Brick is saying—" She stopped short as Brick himself emerged from the armory building, the wooden box in his possession once again. "Looks like we're not done here after all." Brick's earlier uncertainty had been replaced by renewed aggression. Now he had evidence. Now he had leverage. Personal weapons, mysterious photographs, a personnel file that requires intelligence clearance to access. He set the box down and removed the brass compass, holding it up for examination. "This isn't support staff equipment. This is operational gear." Hugo had returned, drawn by the commotion. His eyes fixed on the compass with sudden intensity. "Wait." He stepped forward, reaching for the object. "Let me see that." Brick relinquished the compass reluctantly, watching as the Pentagon captain examined it with growing disbelief. "This is JSOC issue," Hugo said quietly. "Joint Special Operations Command. These aren't given out as souvenirs. They're assigned to specific personnel for specific missions." He looked at Hazel with new eyes. "Where did you get this?" "We're at the turning point now. Everything you thought you knew is about to shatter. Before the big reveal drops, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Share this with someone who loves military stories. You'll want to discuss what happens next." Before Hazel could respond, Ivory's patience finally shattered. Enough of this nonsense. She strode forward, reaching for Hazel's collar with the entitled confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. "You're going to tell us who you really are, right now, or I'm personally ensuring you spend the next decade regretting this little performance." Her hand closed on the fabric. What happened next occurred too fast for most observers to process. One moment, Ivory was grabbing. The next, she was gasping, her wrist locked in a grip that had materialized from nowhere, her arm twisted at an angle that sent pain shooting up to her shoulder. Close quarters combat technique, perfect execution. The kind of response that came from muscle memory, forged through years of specialized training. Hazel released her almost immediately, stepping back with her hands raised in a gesture of non-aggression. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen. "You assaulted an officer," Ivory managed, rubbing her wrist. "That's court-martial. That's prison. You grabbed me first." Hazel's voice remained calm. "I responded to physical contact with proportional force." "Proportional force?" Brick actually laughed. "Where does an armory clerk learn to move like that?" The answer became visible a second later. In the brief struggle, Hazel's collar had torn. Not dramatically, but enough to expose her left shoulder. And there, inked into her skin with the permanence of identity itself, was a tattoo that made everyone within viewing distance stop breathing. A skull wearing a tactical hood, 2 sniper rifles crossed behind it, and beneath, in letters that had clearly been designed to be read only by those who knew what they meant: Devgru Sniper Cell. Wraith. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The afternoon heat pressed down on the range like a physical weight, but no one seemed to notice. Fern Delgado broke the silence first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ghost Reaper. That unit doesn't exist. It's a myth, a story they tell in SEAL school to separate the dreamers from the realists." "Wraith," Gaston breathed. The name seemed to cost him something to speak aloud. "The Wraith? 47 confirmed? That's not possible. Wraith is supposed to be dead?" Hazel's voice cut through the murmuring like a blade through fog. Cold, certain, carrying the weight of someone who had heard that particular assumption many times before. Reports of my death were strategic. The tactical silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the world changed. The convoy arrived with the precision of military choreography. 3 vehicles bearing the markings of flag officer transport. Before they had fully stopped, doors were opening and personnel were scrambling. Rear Admiral Solomon Crawford emerged from the lead vehicle with the bearing of someone who had commanded respect for so long that it had become indistinguishable from his fundamental nature. 3 stars, decades of service, a reputation that preceded him into every room he entered. His attention locked onto one person and did not waver as he crossed the range floor. He stopped indirectly in front of Hazel Whitmore, the armory clerk, the anonymous support staff, the woman everyone had spent the past hour dismissing, mocking, and attempting to humiliate. The silence stretched into eternity. Then Rear Admiral Solomon Crawford, as a 3-star officer at the pinnacle of naval achievement, raised his hand in formal salute. "Master Chief Whitmore!" His voice carried across the shooting range with crystalline clarity, ensuring that every single person present would hear and understand. "It is an honor." The reaction rippled outward like shockwaves from an explosion. Brick Lawson's knees buckled. He grabbed the inspection table for support, his face cycling through expressions too rapidly to catalog. Shock, denial, horror, understanding. "Master Chief," he repeated, the words barely audible. "She's a Master Chief. E9. That's the highest enlisted rank in special warfare." Ivory Ashford had gone pale as fresh snow. Her hand, the one that had grabbed a decorated war hero's collar minutes earlier, trembled visibly against her side. Archer Donnelly simply stood with his mouth open, processing speed apparently insufficient for the magnitude of what had just occurred. Gaston Mercer, 15 years of experience and pride, snapped to attention and saluted without conscious thought. Muscle memory overriding disbelief. Flynn Caldwell's phone slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering against the concrete. The screen displayed thumbnails of the photos he had taken, the ones intended to mock and humiliate. Around them, 25 Navy SEALs, men who had spent their careers preparing for the most dangerous assignments imaginable, stood in frozen silence, their training inadequate preparation for the revelation unfolding before them. Fern Delgado wiped tears from her eyes without embarrassment. "I knew it. I knew there was something different about her." From the canteen doorway, Otis Brennan nodded slowly, his expression carrying the quiet satisfaction of secrets finally revealed. He had known. From the moment Hazel Whitmore had walked onto this base 6 months ago, taking a job so far beneath her capabilities that it bordered on absurd, he had known. "Master Chief Hazel Whitmore," Admiral Crawford continued, his salute still held. "DevGru Sniper Cell. Call sign Wraith. 47 confirmed kills, 3 silver stars, 2 purple hearts. Service in 6 countries under conditions that remain classified to this day." The credentials hung in the air like physical objects, each achievement adding weight to the already crushing realization of just how badly everyone present had miscalculated. Ezra Blackwood had returned from wherever he had fled. Now he stood at the edge of the crowd, his earlier denial forgotten. "Kandahar," he said, his voice thick with emotion. 2014, Operation Crimson Tide. He stepped forward, and there were tears on his cheeks. "You saved my entire squad. We never saw you, never knew who pulled our people out of that nightmare, but I remember the shots. 6 tangos dropped in under 4 seconds. From a ridge we didn't even know existed." He came to attention, saluted. "I've spent 10 years wondering who to thank. 10 years carrying that debt." Hazel's expression flickered. Just for a moment, something human showed through the professional mask. Then it was contained again. "You survived," she said simply. "That's all that matters." The observation deck had become a gallery of shame. Every person who had mocked, dismissed, or antagonized the quiet armory clerk now stood confronted by the magnitude of their error. Clover Nguyen's eyes were wide as dinner plates, her young face reflecting the awe of someone meeting a legend made flesh. Caleb Rourke murmured something about DevGru training techniques, his earlier suspicions now validated beyond any reasonable doubt. Hugo Castellano had stepped back, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the woman he had been sent to find. And Admiral Solomon Crawford finally lowered his salute, his eyes never leaving Hazel's face. "Would someone care to explain," he said, his voice dropping to a temperature that promised consequences, "exactly what I witnessed when I arrived? Because from my perspective, it appeared that a Master Chief Special Warfare operator was being physically accosted by a lieutenant commander, while senior enlisted personnel watched and did nothing." Nobody volunteered an answer. The silence stretched painfully. "I see." Crawford's disappointment was worse than anger would have been. "Then let me be clear. What happened here today was a disgrace to the uniform, a disgrace to the service. and a disgrace to the legacy of every person who has ever worn these insignia with honor. He turned to face the assembled personnel, and his presence seemed to fill the entire range. And Master Chief Whitmore chose to serve in a capacity far beneath her qualifications. She chose anonymity over recognition. She chose to be invisible in a world that celebrates visibility. His voice hardened. And you repaid that choice with contempt, with mockery, with physical assault. Brick had managed to stand upright, but his earlier bravado had evaporated entirely. Admiral, sir, we didn't know. Exactly, Crawford cut him off. You didn't know. You assumed. You judged. You decided that someone's appearance and position told you everything you needed to know about their worth. He shook his head slowly. That kind of thinking gets people killed. The observation might have been philosophical in other circumstances. Here, surrounded by special operators whose survival depended on accurate assessment, it landed like a physical blow. There will be consequences, Crawford continued. Formal counseling in every personnel file, reassignments where appropriate, and mandatory training and basic respect for fellow service members regardless of their apparent position. He turned back to Hazel, and his expression softened infinitesimally. Master Chief, walk with me. They moved away from the crowd, their conversation private but their body language visible. Crawford spoke. Hazel listened. At one point she shook her head. At another, she seemed to ask a question. The Admiral's response made her go very still. Hugo Castellano watched the exchange with obvious interest, his earlier mission apparently relevant to whatever was being discussed. When they returned to the group, Crawford addressed the assembly one final time. I came here today for an inspection. What I found was far more valuable than facility compliance ratings. He looked at each face in turn, ensuring his message penetrated. A Master Chief Whitmore exemplifies what service actually means. Not recognition, not glory, not climbing ranks and collecting accolades. Service means doing what needs to be done, regardless of who knows about it. He paused, letting the words settle. Remember this day. Remember how wrong your assumptions can be. Remember that the quiet person cleaning your weapons or organizing your supplies might be the most dangerous and decorated operator you will ever meet. The Admiral departed with the same precision that had marked his arrival, leaving behind a range full of personnel trying to process what had just occurred. Brick found himself standing in front of Hazel, uncertain how to begin. His earlier aggression seemed childish in retrospect, the posturing of someone who had never truly understood what being a warrior meant. Master Chief, He swallowed hard. I don't have words. I disrespected you in every possible way. I mocked you. I touched you. I challenged your abilities when I should have been asking to learn from you. Hazel regarded him with those pale gray eyes. The silence stretched until discomfort became nearly unbearable. Get up. Brick hadn't realized he was still partially crouched, as if his body had been trying to kneel without his conscious permission. A SEAL doesn't kneel, Hazel continued. You kneel to no one except the flag and what it represents. Remember that. She reached into the pocket of her worn fatigue pants and withdrew something small, metallic, a challenge coin, its surface scratched and dulled by years of handling. The emblem showed the Ghost Reaper skull, with crosshairs superimposed. This belonged to my spotter. Her voice carried an edge that hadn't been present before. He didn't make it back from our last mission together. She pressed the coin into Brick's palm. Keep it. Remember it. The next time you decide to judge someone by what you see on the surface, think about what you might be missing underneath. Brick stared at the coin as if it might burn him. In a way, it probably would. That weight of legacy and sacrifice and meaning concentrated into a small circle of metal. Yes, Master Chief. His voice had gone hoarse. I will. I promise. Around them, the range had begun to return to something resembling normal activity, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Personnel moved with a different awareness now, glancing at each other with fresh consideration, wondering what secrets might hide behind familiar faces. Otis emerged from the canteen carrying a tray of coffee cups, distributing them with the practiced ease of long habit. When he reached Hazel, he paused. Figured you might need this. He handed her a cup, steam rising in lazy spirals. Been a while since anyone's made you work that hard to stay invisible. You knew, she said. It wasn't a question. Recognized your shooting the first week you were here. That rhythm, that precision. Only seen it once before, in '07 during a joint exercise in the Philippines. He smiled. the expression deepening the lines around his eyes. Never forget watching a ghost take apart an entire enemy position without anyone knowing where the shots were coming from. Lot of ghosts in this world, not like you. Otis set down his tray. The old warriors remember, Hazel. We always remember. His phone rang, and when he answered, his expression shifted to something between surprise and respect. "It's for you," he said, offering the device. "Old friend wants to say hello." Hazel took the phone, pressing it to her ear. Whatever she heard made her close her eyes briefly, emotion flickering across her features before being contained. "Levi." She spoke the name quietly. "It's been a long time." The voice on the other end was audible only to her, but Otis caught fragments. Something about old debts, something about ghosts who never truly rest. When the call ended, Hazel handed back the phone without comment, but her hand, steady through everything that had happened today, trembled slightly as she released it. Hugo approached with the careful determination of someone who had been waiting for the right moment. "Master Chief, now that the situation has clarified somewhat, perhaps we could discuss why the Pentagon actually sent me here." Hazel's gaze sharpened. "I assumed it was about facility evaluation." Among other things, Hugo glanced around to ensure privacy, then lowered his voice. "There's a situation developing overseas, a kidnapping. The victim is the daughter of someone you served with, someone who didn't come home." The coffee cup in Hazel's hand stopped halfway into her lips. "Marcus Webb's daughter?" Hugo nodded slowly. "She was taken 3 days ago. No ransom demand, no contact, just disappearance. Marcus is dead. Yes, but you're not. And you're the only person alive who knows that region well enough to navigate it without official support." Hugo's expression carried the weight of asking for something he had no right to request. The Pentagon can't officially sanction a rescue operation. Too many political complications. But unofficially, they're prepared to provide resources to someone operating independently. Hazel set down her coffee with careful precision. "His daughter," she repeated. "How old?" 17. The number hung in the air between them. "Where?" "Northern Syria, near the Turkish border, an area you mapped during Operation Crimson Tide." Hazel's jaw tightened. The mission that had killed Marcus. The mission that had earned her the 3rd Silver Star and the scars that still ached when the weather changed. The mission that haunted her dreams on nights when sleep became impossible. "I'll need equipment, transport, current intelligence, all of which will be provided." Hugo allowed himself a small smile. "The Admiral's already signed the authorization for your reinstatement to active duty, effective immediately." From across the range, the personnel who had spent the afternoon learning humility watched as the quiet armory clerk transformed into something else entirely. Fern approached Ezra, who had been standing apart since his emotional confession. "What actually happened in Kandahar?" she asked quietly. "You said she saved your squad, but there's more to it than that." Ezra was silent for a long moment. "We were pinned," he finally said. "Ambush in a valley that should have been secure. 18 hostiles, heavily armed, perfect positioning. We lost 2 men in the first 30 seconds. The rest of us were waiting to die." He paused, gathering himself. "Then the shooting started, but not from the enemy, from somewhere we couldn't identify. One by one they dropped. Perfect shots, impossible shots. By the time it was over, every hostile was down and we never saw the shooter." "And you think that was her?" "I know it was her." Ezra's voice carried absolute certainty. "Because afterward, when we searched the area, we found a position on a ridge that shouldn't have been accessible. A single spent casing, and scratched into the rock, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. One word." "What word?" "Wraith." The afternoon sun had begun its descent toward the Pacific horizon, casting long shadows across the shooting range. The crowd had thinned as personnel returned to their duties, each carrying the weight of new understanding. Clover found Hazel near the armory, gathering personal effects from the locker that had been searched without her permission. "Master Chief?" The young woman's voice trembled slightly. "I know this is probably inappropriate, but I have to ask. Will you teach me?" Hazel paused in her packing. "Teach you what?" "Everything. Anything." Clover's eyes shone with the fervent hope of youth. "I want to be like you." For a moment, something softened in Hazel's expression, something almost maternal. "No," she said gently. "You don't want to be like me. The path I walked leaves scars that never heal and memories that never fade." She placed a hand on Clover's shoulder. "But I can teach you to be the best version of yourself. That's worth more than any legend. Clover nodded, tears threatening to overflow. I'd like that. Good. Hazel's hand squeezed briefly before releasing. When I get back, we'll start your real training. When you get back? There's something I need to do first. Someone who needs help. The younger woman didn't ask for details. In this world, some questions were better left unspoken. Willow Tate, the newest recruit at the facility, had been observing from a distance. Now she sat in a quiet corner, notebook in hand, documenting her thoughts with the desperate intensity of someone trying to capture meaning before it escaped. Today I learned what a real hero looks like, she wrote. Not loud, not boastful, just quiet strength. The kind that doesn't need recognition because it already knows its own worth. I want to remember this. I want to be someone worth remembering. She closed the notebook as the shadows lengthened, carrying her new understanding into whatever future awaited. Evening had settled over the range when Admiral Crawford returned, this time alone. He found Hazel standing near the very lane where this extraordinary day had begun, her gaze fixed on the distant target that had started everything. The Pentagon briefing, he said without preamble. You understand the risks? Better than most. And you're going anyway. It wasn't a question. Marcus saved my life twice before the mission that killed him. Hazel's voice carried the particular weight of debts that could never be repaid. If his daughter is in trouble, there's no force on earth that would keep me from trying to help. Crawford nodded slowly. I expected nothing less. He reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a folded document. Your reinstatement papers. Master Chief Hazel Whitmore, officially returned to active duty status. She took the papers but didn't unfold them. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet. What you're about to do could end your career if it goes wrong. Could end considerably more than that. With respect, sir, my career ended a long time ago. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Everything since then has just been marking time. Crawford studied her for a moment, seeing past the surface to the warrior beneath. You know what I admired most about the reports on Wraith? The confirmed kills were impressive. The medals were impressive. But what truly struck me was what you didn't do. Sir, you never talked about it, never traded on your reputation, never used your record to advance or gain advantage. In a world obsessed with recognition, you chose to be invisible. He shook his head slowly. That takes a kind of strength most people never develop. Or a kind of weariness. The admission hung between them. Either way, Crawford said, you've earned the right to make your own choices. Good luck, Master Chief, and come back alive. That's the plan. He departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Hazel alone with the fading light and the memories it carried. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without hesitation. For several seconds, there was only silence on the line. Then a voice spoke, familiar in a way that made her blood run cold. Hello, Wraith. She knew that voice, had heard it in her nightmares for a decade, had mourned its owner in quiet ceremonies and private grief. That's impossible, she whispered. You're dead. So were you, once upon a time. The voice carried a hint of dark amusement. Ghost Reaper doesn't die easily. We both know that. Who is this? You know who this is. The question isn't who. The question is why. A pause, pregnant with implication. We need to talk, Hazel, about what really happened in Kandahar, about why I had to disappear, and about who's actually responsible for Marcus's death. The line went dead. Hazel stood motionless, the phone clutched in her hand, her mind racing through possibilities that she had never allowed herself to consider. If that voice was real, if the person it belonged to was actually alive, then everything she had believed for the past 10 years, every assumption, every conclusion, every piece of carefully constructed understanding was wrong, and the truth, whatever it turned out to be, was still waiting in the darkness. She looked toward the tarmac, where transport helicopters waited to carry her into the unknown. Some ghosts, she murmured to the empty range, don't stay buried. Then she walked into the gathering night, leaving questions without answers and a story far from finished. The helicopter's rotors had barely stopped spinning when Hazel's boots touched the tarmac, her mind still processing the impossible phone call that had shattered a decade of certainty. Around her, the Joint Sniper Training Center hummed with the residual energy of revelation, personnel moving through their duties with a new awareness that hadn't existed 12 hours earlier. But before she could disappear into the machinery of mission preparation, Admiral Crawford intercepted her path with the determined stride of someone who had unfinished business. "Master Chief, a moment." It wasn't a request. They walked together toward the administration building, the evening air carrying the salt-tinged breeze that marked Camp Pendleton's proximity to the Pacific. Neither spoke until they reached the privacy of Crawford's temporary office. "Before you deploy," the Admiral began, settling behind a desk covered with the day's accumulated paperwork, "there are matters that require resolution. The personnel involved in today's incident. With respect, sir, I have more pressing concerns than hurt feelings." "This isn't about feelings." Crawford's voice carried an edge that demanded attention. "This is about institutional failure, about a culture that allows experienced operators to publicly humiliate and physically assault a fellow service member without consequence." He leaned forward. "That culture ends today." Hazel remained standing, her posture military straight, despite the exhaustion she refused to acknowledge. "What did you have in mind?" "Chief Petty Officer Lawson is being reassigned. Effective immediately." Crawford pulled a folder from the stack and opened it. 6 months at Basic Training Command, teaching recruits the fundamentals he apparently forgot himself. "That seems excessive, does it?" The Admiral's eyebrow arched. "He put hands on a Master Chief, in front of witnesses. The fact that you chose not to respond with appropriate force doesn't diminish the severity of his action." Hazel considered this. "He didn't know who I was? That's precisely the point. He treated you that way because he believed you were someone without power or status, someone he could bully without consequence." Crawford shook his head slowly. "That's not a warrior. That's a predator who only respects strength he can see. We don't need predators in the teams. We need leaders." The assessment was harsh but accurate. Hazel had seen the same dynamic play out in countless units over the years, strong personalities mistaking aggression for competence, confusing dominance with leadership. "And the lieutenant commander?" "Ashford is facing an investigation for conduct unbecoming an officer." Crawford's expression suggested he found this particular consequence especially satisfying. "Her assault on you, regardless of your response, constitutes a serious breach of military protocol. The JAG office will determine appropriate action." "She grabbed my collar. That's hardly—" "She grabbed a decorated war hero's collar while attempting to intimidate and humiliate," Crawford cut her off. "The intent matters as much as the action. Perhaps more." Hazel fell silent. She had spent so long operating in shadows, measuring success by missions completed rather than recognition earned, that the sudden weight of her own legend felt foreign, uncomfortable. "The others?" she finally asked. "Donnelly loses his promotion board eligibility. Caldwell is being required to delete all photographs and video recordings, followed by a formal written apology to you and mandatory sensitivity training." Crawford paused. "Mercer requested permission to resign." This surprised her. "Gaston?" He felt his failure of judgment was too severe to continue in a leadership position. "That's unnecessary. I told him the same thing. Ordered him to stay and learn from the experience." The Admiral allowed himself a slight smile. "Sometimes the best lessons come from our worst moments. Mercer has 15 years of valuable experience. I'd rather see him grow than run." The door opened without warning, and Hugo Castellano entered with the urgent energy of someone carrying time-sensitive information. "Admiral, Master Chief, we have movement." Crawford gestured for him to continue. "The kidnappers made contact. They're demanding extraction of a prisoner held in Turkish custody, a mid-level operative connected to several regional terror networks. Ransom by proxy," Hazel observed. "They want us to do their dirty work." "Exactly. The official position is that we don't negotiate with terrorists, which means the girl has approximately 72 hours before they decide she's more valuable as a message than a bargaining chip." The clinical assessment of a 17-year-old's life expectancy landed in the room like a physical weight. "Transport?" Hazel asked. "Ready when you are. We have assets positioned near the Syrian border, unofficial channels that don't exist on any official manifest." Hugo handed her a tablet containing mission briefing materials. "Everything we know about the location, the hostile force composition, and potential extraction routes." Hazel scrolled through the information with the practiced efficiency of someone who had consumed hundreds of similar briefings throughout her career. The terrain was familiar, etched into her memory by blood and sacrifice and losses that still haunted quiet moments. "I'll need support, local assets who know the current situation. Already arranged. A Kurdish militia unit that's worked with American forces before. They owe us favors. Hugo hesitated. There's something else. The intelligence suggests this kidnapping wasn't random. The girl was specifically targeted. Because of Marcus? Possibly, or because of you. The implication settled into Hazel's consciousness with disturbing weight. If the kidnappers knew about her connection to Marcus, knew enough to use his daughter as bait, then this wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a trap. I'm going anyway, she said, before either man could voice the obvious concern. Crawford nodded slowly. I expected nothing less. But Hazel. He used her first name deliberately, stripping away rank and formality. Come back. Whatever you find over there, whatever truths emerge, come back alive. That's an order. Understood, sir. She turned to leave, but Hugo's voice stopped her at the door. The phone call you received? The one that shook you. Want to tell us about it? Hazel's hand rested on the doorframe, her back to both men. Someone I thought was dead might not be. Who? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. She walked into the corridor, leaving questions without answers echoing in her wake. The base had transformed during her meeting with Crawford. Word of the Admiral's disciplinary actions had spread with the velocity that only military gossip achieved, and the atmosphere carried the charged quality of institutional reckoning. Brick Lawson stood near the armory entrance, his personal effects packed into a standard-issue duffel bag. The swagger that had defined his presence mere hours ago had evaporated entirely, replaced by something that resembled genuine reflection. Master Chief? Hazel stopped, but didn't speak. I know you're deploying. I know there's nothing I can say that makes what I did acceptable. He swallowed hard, the movement visible even in the dim lighting. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did wasn't just disrespectful. It was dangerous. The kind of thinking that gets people killed. Crawford's words. His words. My understanding. Brick met her eyes with difficulty. I've spent 12 years believing that strength was the only thing that mattered. That you had to be loud and aggressive and dominant to be effective. He shook his head. Today showed me how wrong I was. The strongest person on that range was the one who said almost nothing. Hazel studied him for a long moment, reading the authenticity of his contrition. The coin I gave you. Brick's hand moved instinctively to his pocket. I have it. My spotter earned that coin in Fallujah. 04. Saved my life by taking a round meant for me. He carried that coin for 8 more years before Kandahar took him. Her voice carried the particular weight of memories that never faded. Every time you look at it, remember that respect isn't given to uniforms or ranks or reputations. It's given to people, all people, until they prove they don't deserve it. Yes, Master Chief. And Brick? She started walking again. When I get back, I'm going to need instructors who understand that lesson. Instructors who can teach the next generation to be better than we were. She didn't wait for his response, but his voice followed her down the corridor. I'll be ready. Ivory Ashford was nowhere to be seen, reportedly confined to quarters pending the JAG investigation. The lieutenant commander's absence created a noticeable void in the command structure, one that would need to be filled by someone with better judgment and fewer pretensions. Gaston Mercer, however, stood at attention near the range office, his face a mask of military composure that couldn't quite hide the turmoil beneath. Senior Chief, Master Chief. He saluted formally, holding the gesture until she returned it. I want to apologize for everything, for dismissing you, for allowing my people to treat you the way they did, for 15 years of experience that apparently taught me nothing about recognizing true warriors. Apology accepted. Hazel's response was immediate. Now let it go. With respect, I don't think I can. Then you'll waste years carrying weight that serves no purpose. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. I've seen good operators destroy themselves with guilt over things they couldn't control. Don't add yourself to that list. Learn from today. Grow from it. But don't let it define you. Gaston's military bearing wavered slightly. How? How do you move past something like this? You don't move past it. You move through it. Hazel's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Every day you make choices about who you want to be. Today you made bad choices. Tomorrow, make better ones. That's all any of us can do. It sounds simple when you say it. It's not simple. It's just true. She resumed her walk toward the flight line, leaving Gaston to process wisdom earned through decades of service and sacrifice. Solomon mentioned the Advanced Sniper Certification Program during their earlier briefing. The 12-week course had been developed by retired special operations veterans, combining theoretical ballistics with wind-reading techniques and virtual simulation exercises. Graduates received credentials recognized by private security firms worldwide. For veterans seeking high-paying contractor positions or law enforcement sniper roles, this certification opened doors that combat experience alone couldn't unlock. It was exactly the kind of program that could transform operators like Gaston into the instructors the next generation needed. The thought stayed with her as she approached the waiting helicopter. Fern Delgado intercepted her 20 yards from the aircraft, the Marine Gunnery Sergeant's expression carrying the intensity of someone with important words that couldn't wait. "Master Chief, a moment." Hazel paused. "I've been thinking about what Ezra said, about Kandahar." Fern's voice dropped to ensure privacy. "There's more to that story than what he knows, isn't there? Most stories have more layers than any single perspective can capture. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give." Hazel glanced toward the helicopter, where the pilot was running through pre-flight checks. Some missions stay classified for reasons that go beyond security clearances. What happened in Kandahar falls into that category. Fern absorbed this without argument. "Will you tell me, someday, when the clearances don't matter anymore?" The question carried a weight that surprised Hazel. In a career defined by isolation and anonymity, the idea of sharing the full truth with anyone felt simultaneously appealing and terrifying. "Maybe," she finally said, "if there's a someday." "There will be." Fern's certainty was almost aggressive. "You're coming back from this mission. I don't know how I know that, but I do. Some people are too stubborn to die before their story's finished." "And my story isn't finished?" "Not even close." Fern smiled, the expression transforming her stern features. "I'll be here when you get back. We all will. And Master Chief, thank you." "For what?" "For showing us what we should have seen all along. That true strength doesn't need to announce itself." The sentiment echoed in Hazel's mind as she covered the remaining distance to the aircraft. The pilot acknowledged her approach with a professional nod, his attention focused on instruments and procedures rather than the legend climbing into his helicopter. Some people, she reflected, still understood the value of treating others as equals, regardless of reputation. The rotors began their acceleration as she strapped in, the familiar rhythm of helicopter flight settling into her bones. How many times had she made this journey? How many missions launched from tarmacs around the world? Destinations unknown, survival uncertain. This one felt different. This one was personal. As the aircraft lifted into the darkening sky, Hazel allowed herself a moment of reflection. The day had been exhausting in ways that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Being seen, being recognized, being forced to acknowledge an identity she had carefully buried for years. It scraped against something raw inside her, but there was something else too, something that felt almost like relief. The phone call returned to her thoughts, that voice, impossible, yet unmistakable. If he was alive, if the person she had mourned was somehow still breathing somewhere in the world, then the carefully constructed narrative of Kandahar was a lie. And lies, in her experience, always protected something, or someone. She would find the truth, whatever it cost. Below, Camp Pendleton receded into a pattern of lights and shadows, the Joint Sniper Training Center becoming just another point on a landscape full of places where warriors trained and struggled, and sometimes learned what really mattered. The pilot's voice crackled through her headset. "Flight time approximately 4 hours to the forward staging area. Weather looks clear. Should be smooth sailing." Hazel didn't respond. Smooth sailing wasn't something she had ever learned to trust. What a moment, right? But believe it or not, this isn't even our most intense story. We've got another video about a female pilot who saved 381 SEALs against impossible odds. Links in the description. Subscribe now, because next week's story, even crazier. See you there. The forward staging area existed in the shadowy space between official acknowledgement and operational reality. No maps marked its location, no manifests recorded the personnel who passed through its temporary structures. For all practical purposes, it didn't exist, which made it perfect for missions that also didn't exist. Hazel stepped off the helicopter into pre-dawn darkness, the air carrying the distinct chill of mountain altitude. Kurdish fighters materialized from the shadows, their movements professional and controlled, weapons held with the casual readiness of people who lived in constant proximity to violence. "You are Wraith?" The speaker was a woman roughly Hazel's age, her face weathered by sun and conflict, her eyes carrying the particular hardness that came from watching too many friends die. I am Zalal. We have been told to assist you." The woman's English carried a heavy accent but remained perfectly comprehensible. "The girl is being held in a compound 20 kilometers east, heavily fortified, approximately 15 to 20 hostiles. Defensive positions? Multiple. They expect rescue attempt. Have prepared accordingly." Hazel absorbed this information while studying the tactical map Zalal produced. The compound occupied a strategically sound position, protected by terrain on 3 sides with a single approach road that could be easily defended or demolished. "They want us to come," she observed. "This setup is designed to channel any rescue force into kill zones." Zalal nodded grimly. "We lost 3 fighters confirming their positions. They are serious people, well-trained, well-equipped. Any identification on their leadership? One man seems to command, European features, professional bearing. Our sources suggest he has military background, though from where we cannot determine. European, professional." The description triggered something in Hazel's memory, a pattern she couldn't quite complete. "I need to see the compound myself." "That can be arranged, but we should wait for full darkness. Their surveillance is active during twilight hours." The delay chafed against Hazel's urgency, but tactical reality couldn't be ignored. Moving prematurely would only get more people killed. "Show me what else you have." The next several hours passed in detailed planning, every approach angle analyzed, every potential contingency discussed. Zalal's fighters proved more sophisticated than their guerrilla appearance suggested, their knowledge of the local terrain invaluable for identifying options that satellite imagery couldn't reveal. By the time full darkness settled over the mountains, Hazel had developed a plan that might, with considerable luck and precise execution, actually work. "The compound's water supply comes from a spring 300 meters north," she explained, sketching positions on the map. "If we contaminate it with something non-lethal but incapacitating, we reduce their effective fighting force without triggering an immediate alert. And then we wait. Let the effects spread. When enough of them are compromised, we move." Zalal considered this. It could work, but the girl might also be affected. "I'll handle extraction personally. Get in, get her, get out before anyone realizes what's happening." Hazel met the Kurdish fighter's eyes. "I need your people to create a diversion on the eastern approach. Draw attention away from my insertion point." "You would go alone?" "I move faster alone, and I've done this before." The statement carried no boasting, only fact. Zalal studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. We will create your diversion. But Wraith, if something goes wrong in there, we cannot mount rescue. Our numbers are insufficient." "I understand. Do you? Because the girl's father was someone important to you, yes? That kind of connection can cloud judgment, can make people take risks they shouldn't." Hazel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Marcus Webb saved my life, more than once. When he died, I promised myself I would honor that debt however I could." She paused. "His daughter is 17 years old. She's innocent in whatever game is being played here. I'm not leaving her behind. Even if it costs your life? Even then." Zalal's weathered face softened, almost imperceptibly. "You Americans have strange ideas about obligation, but I respect them." She extended her hand. "Good hunting, Wraith. Good hunting." The infiltration began at 0300 hours, darkness providing the cover that daylight would have denied. Hazel moved through terrain that memory had mapped more accurately than any satellite, each step deliberate, each movement calculated to minimize detection. The compound resolved from shadows into solid form as she approached, its walls and structures taking shape against the slightly lighter darkness of the sky. Guards patrolled predictable patterns, their attention focused outward toward the expected approach routes rather than the unexpected angle Hazel had chosen. The contaminated water had been introduced 6 hours earlier. By now, the effects should be manifesting. On cue, a guard near the main gate doubled over, his weapon clattering to the ground as his body rebelled against the biological assault. 2 more followed within seconds, their distress creating exactly the distraction Hazel needed. She was over the wall and into the compound before anyone noticed. Moving through structures felt familiar in the worst possible way. The muscle memory of countless similar operations guided her actions, each corner checked, each doorway cleared with the automatic precision of deeply ingrained training. The girl was being held in the central building. Intelligence had confirmed that much. Getting to her required navigating a maze of corridors and guard positions, each obstacle another opportunity for discovery and death. Hazel encountered her first hostile 30 meters inside the perimeter. The man was stumbling, clearly affected by the contaminant, his weapon held loosely in compromised hands. She disabled him silently, the technique humane but effective, leaving him unconscious rather than dead. Killing wasn't always necessary. The mission was extraction, not elimination. The corridor opened into a larger space, and there, finally, she found what she had come for. Sarah Webb sat in a metal chair, her wrists bound, but her spirit apparently unbroken. At 17, she had inherited her father's stubborn jaw and her mother's fierce eyes, a combination that suggested compliance wasn't in her nature. "Who are you?" The girl's voice carried more defiance than fear. "Someone who owes your father everything." Hazel moved quickly, cutting the bindings with practiced efficiency. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then stay behind me. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. Don't speak unless absolutely necessary." Sarah nodded, her young face settling into an expression of determined focus that reminded Hazel painfully of Marcus. They made it halfway to the extraction point before everything went wrong. The man who stepped into their path wasn't suffering from contamination. His posture suggested someone who had anticipated the attack and prepared accordingly. His features, visible in the dim light filtering through a window, were exactly as Zalal had described: European, professional, military bearing, and horrifyingly familiar. "Hello, Wraith?" The voice was the same one that had spoken through her phone 24 hours earlier. "Took you long enough?" Hazel positioned herself between Sarah and the threat, her weapon raised but her finger hesitating on the trigger. "You're dead. I watched the building collapse. I heard the explosion. You heard what we wanted you to hear, saw what we needed you to see." The man smiled, the expression carrying no warmth. "The world needed Wraith to believe I was gone. Otherwise, the mission couldn't continue." "What mission? What are you talking about?" "The real mission, the one that started in Kandahar and never actually ended." He stepped closer, apparently unconcerned by the weapon pointed at his chest. "Marcus figured it out, you know. That's why he had to die. He discovered the truth about what we were actually doing there, and he couldn't be trusted to stay silent." The words landed like physical blows. "You killed him? Your own teammate?" "I eliminated a security risk. There's a difference." The man's casual tone made the admission more horrifying. Marcus was always too idealistic, too attached to outdated concepts like honor and loyalty. He would have exposed everything. Exposed what? The operation within the operation. The real reason Ghost Reaper existed. He spread his hands in a gesture that mocked explanation. "We weren't just eliminating targets, Hazel. We were shaping events, removing obstacles, creating chaos that served larger purposes." "Whose purposes? Does it matter? Money flows, power shifts. And people like us do the work that makes it possible." He tilted his head, studying her. "You could have been part of it. You were supposed to be part of it, but you were always too much like Marcus, too principled." Sarah's hand gripped in Hazel's arm, the girl's presence a reminder of stakes beyond personal revelation. "The girl," Hazel said, "she's not part of this." "The girl is exactly part of this. Bait. The only way to guarantee you had come personally." The man's smile widened. "I needed you here, Hazel. Needed you to understand before the end." "The end of what?" "Of everything. The old operations, the old secrets, the old ghosts." He reached into his jacket, and Hazel's finger tightened on the trigger. But what he withdrew wasn't a weapon. It was a file folder. "Everything is in here. Names, dates, operations. Everyone involved in the Shadow Network that used Ghost Reaper as its private enforcement arm." He held it out. "Take it. Expose it. Burn it all down." "Why?" "Because I'm dying." The admission carried no self-pity. "Cancer. Inoperable. 6 months if I'm lucky." He laughed softly. "Ironic, isn't it? After everything I've survived, everything I've done, my own body becomes the enemy I can't defeat. And this is supposed to be redemption? This is supposed to be reality. I'm not a good person, Hazel. Never was. But I'm also not ready to let the people who used us continue without consequence." He pressed the folder toward her. "The girl was never in danger. My people had instructions to keep her safe until you arrived. She's leverage, not a target." Hazel took the folder without lowering her weapon. You expect me to believe any of this? I expect you to verify it. You were always thorough. It's why you survived when others didn't. He stepped back, hands raised in surrender. Take the girl, take the file, leave this place and do whatever your conscience demands. And you? I'll disappear, again, for whatever time I have left. His expression shifted to something almost resembling regret. I'm sorry about Marcus. He deserved better than what I gave him, better than what I took from him. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, it doesn't. He began backing toward a doorway, his movements careful and non-threatening. But maybe his daughter surviving means something. Maybe the truth finally coming out means something. This isn't over. No, he agreed. It's really just beginning. Then he was gone, melting into shadows with the same skill that had once made him one of Ghost Reaper's most effective operators. Hazel stood frozen for several seconds, the file folder heavy in her hands, the weight of revelation settling into her consciousness. We need to move, Sarah said quietly. Whoever that was, he might change his mind. The practical observation cut through Hazel's paralysis. She secured the folder, confirmed the corridor was clear, and resumed the extraction. The path out was easier than the path in, as if obstacles had been deliberately removed. By the time they reached the perimeter wall, Zalal's fighters had neutralized the remaining resistance, their efficiency suggesting the compound's defenders had been compromised even more thoroughly than planned. You have her, Zalal approached with obvious relief. And you are uninjured. The situation was more complicated than expected. It always is. The Kurdish fighter gestured toward the waiting vehicles. We should move before reinforcements arrive. This area will not remain quiet for long. The journey back to the staging area passed in tense silence. Sarah pressed against Hazel's side with the desperate need for human contact that extreme stress produced. The girl hadn't spoken since the compound, her young mind presumably processing experiences that no 17-year-old should ever face. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached safety, the emerging sunlight painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose that seemed inappropriate for the darkness of recent hours. Master Chief, Hugo Castellano emerged from the command tent, his expression mixing relief with urgent curiosity. Report? Target recovered, minimal casualties on our side. The compound's occupants were neutralized through non-lethal means where possible. And the hostile leadership, Hazel hesitated, escaped deliberately, after providing intelligence that requires immediate analysis. Hugo's eyebrows climbed. What kind of intelligence? She handed him the folder. The kind that changes everything. The flight back to Camp Pendleton stretched across time zones and emotional states, Sarah sleeping fitfully while Hazel processed revelations that threatened to reshape her understanding of her entire career. Ghost Reaper hadn't been what she thought. The missions she had executed, the lives she had taken, the sacrifices she had made, all of it had served purposes beyond the official justifications. Shadow purposes, hidden agendas. And Marcus had died because he discovered the truth. The folder contained enough documentation to expose networks reaching into military command structures, intelligence agencies, and corporate boardrooms. Names that would shock, operations that would scandalize, connections that would destroy careers and reputations built over decades. If the information was genuine, if it wasn't an elaborate deception designed to achieve some other purpose entirely, Hazel needed verification, needed independent confirmation before acting on anything the file contained. But one truth required no verification. The man who had been her teammate, her friend, her fellow ghost, had killed Marcus Webb, had murdered him to protect secrets that should never have existed in the first place. That truth demanded justice, eventually, when the time was right. For now, there was a 17-year-old girl who needed to return to whatever remained of normal life, and a facility full of personnel who had learned hard lessons that shouldn't be wasted. Camp Pendleton materialized beneath the descending aircraft, its familiar structures representing something Hazel hadn't expected to feel. Home, or at least the closest approximation she had known in decades. The welcoming committee surprised her, not in its existence but in its composition. Admiral Crawford stood at the center, his presence lending official weight to the moment, but surrounding him were faces she recognized from the shooting range confrontation. Brick Lawson, Gaston Mercer, Fern Delgado, Caleb Rourke, even young Clover Nguyen, her expression bright with anticipation. And beside them, representatives of the larger base community, veterans who had heard the story, Service members who understood what the moment represented. Families who had come to witness something that they considered important. Hundreds of people, standing in formation, waiting. "What is this?" Hazel asked as the helicopter touched down. Hugo, who had traveled with her, smiled. "This is respect, Master Chief, the kind that had to be earned the hard way." She helped Sarah down from the aircraft, keeping a protective hand on the girl's shoulder as they approached the assembled crowd. Crawford stepped forward, his formal bearing softened by something that looked almost like paternal pride. "Master Chief Whitmore, on behalf of the Joint Sniper Training Center, the United States Navy, and the personnel assembled here today, welcome home." The crowd erupted in applause. Not the polite acknowledgement of official ceremonies, but something deeper, something genuine. Hazel stood frozen, uncertain how to respond to recognition she had never sought and still didn't entirely want. Sarah squeezed her hand. "They're thanking you," the girl whispered. "Let them." Good advice from someone who had endured horrors that would have broken most adults. Hazel filed it away for future consideration. "Thank you, Admiral." Her voice carried across the sudden silence that followed the applause. But the real thanks belonged to the people who made this mission possible. Zalal and her fighters risked everything to save a girl they had never met. Captain Castellano coordinated resources that officially don't exist. And the personnel at this facility learned lessons that will make them better warriors and better people. She paused, looking at the faces that had mocked and dismissed her just days earlier. "I didn't come here to be recognized. I came here to disappear, to find whatever peace might be possible after the life I've lived." Her gaze moved across the crowd, settling briefly on Brick, on Gaston, on others who had learned humility through humiliation. What I found instead was something I didn't expect. I found people capable of growth, capable of change, capable of becoming the warriors this nation needs. The silence that followed it was complete, absolute. That matters more than any medal or commendation or ceremony. It matters because the next generation is watching. They're learning from us what service means, what honor means, what respect means. And if the lessons they learn come from moments of failure followed by genuine change, those lessons will stick. She straightened slightly, her posture settling into something that acknowledged the weight of the moment. "I won't be disappearing again. At least not yet. Admiral Crawford has asked me to stay, to teach, to share whatever wisdom I've accumulated over the years." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I've accepted." The applause that followed was even louder than before. In the chaos of congratulations and welcomes that followed, individual conversations emerged from the collective celebration. Brick found her near the armory, the challenge coin she had given him visible in his palm. "Master Chief, I want you to know that I've requested assignment to your training program, if you'll have me." Despite the reassignment to basic training, Admiral Crawford said my time there could be shortened if you requested it. Something about the value of reformed perspectives in instructor roles. Hazel studied him, reading sincerity where arrogance had once lived. 3 months. Prove you have actually learned something, and we'll talk about acceleration. "Yes, Master Chief." His relief was palpable. "I won't let you down." Don't let yourself down. That's the only standard that matters. Gaston approached next, his weathered face carrying something that looked almost like peace. "Master Chief, I've been thinking about what you said, about moving through rather than past. And I've started, one day at a time, better choices." He almost smiled. "It's harder than I expected. The worthwhile things usually are. I wanted to ask, if it's not presumptuous, whether you might consider me for the instructor program as well. Not immediately. I know I have more to learn, but eventually." Hazel nodded slowly. "When you're ready, come find me. We'll see what you've become." The afternoon sun had begun its descent when Hazel finally found a moment of solitude, standing at the same shooting lane where everything had started. Lane 7, the impossible shot. The range was quiet, the day's activities wound down, the personnel dispersed to barracks and families, and whatever private moments they had carved from military life. "Penny for your thoughts?" Fern had approached without Hazel noticing, a testament to either the Marine's skills or Hazel's distraction. Just remembering. The shot that started all this? That. And other things. Hazel's gaze remained fixed on the distant target. Marcus used to say that snipers were the loneliest people in any military. We operate apart. We succeed through invisibility. We measure our worth in deaths we cause from distances that make connection impossible. Sounds accurate. He was wrong, though. We're not lonely because of distance. We're lonely because no one else can understand what we carry. She turned to face Fern directly. The weight of lives taken, the burden of choices made, the knowledge of what we're capable of and what that capability costs. Fern was silent for a moment. Is that why you tried to disappear? The weight became too heavy? Partly because I didn't know who I was without the mission, without the purpose. Hazel shook her head slowly. Turns out I'm still figuring that out. Maybe that's okay. Maybe figuring it out is the point. Maybe. The silence between them was comfortable rather than awkward, the connection of people who understood each other beyond words. Ezra wants to talk to you, Fern finally said. He's been working up the courage all day. About Kandahar? About everything. He says he needs to understand what happened, what really happened. Hazel considered this. The truth about Kandahar was more complicated than anyone knew, more dangerous than most could handle, but Ezra had earned some answers through a decade of wondering. Send him over. I'll tell him what I can. Fern nodded and departed, leaving Hazel alone with the fading light and the memories it carried. Ezra arrived as the last colors drained from the sky, his silhouette uncertain against the darkening range. Master Chief. Ezra, sit. They settled onto the shooting bench, facing the direction Hazel's legendary shot had traveled, the target invisible now in the growing darkness. What do you want to know? Everything, he paused. Anything, whatever you can tell me. Hazel was silent for a long moment, organizing thoughts that had never been spoken aloud. Your squad was ambushed because someone wanted you dead. Not randomly, specifically. You had information that certain people found inconvenient. What information? You had photographed a supply cache that wasn't supposed to exist. Weapons that had been officially destroyed ending up in enemy hands. Evidence of something larger than any of you realized. Ezra's breath caught. We reported that cache, through proper channels. Which is exactly how the wrong people found out what you knew. Hazel's voice was flat. The ambush was arranged within 48 hours. Your entire squad was supposed to die that day. But we didn't, because of you. Because I wasn't following orders. I was there investigating the same thing you had stumbled onto. When I saw the setup, I knew something was wrong. She paused. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. The report I filed afterward accused me of an unauthorized operation outside mission parameters. They punished you for saving us. They buried the incident, my report, your photographs. All of it disappeared into classification levels that prevent anyone from asking questions. Ezra was silent, processing implications that extended far beyond a single firefight. The people responsible, are they still operating? Some of them. Hazel's expression hardened. But I have information now that might change that. Evidence that could expose everything. What are you going to do? I'm going to be patient, careful, strategic. She turned to face him directly. And when the time is right, I'm going to burn it all down. The commitment carried weight that Ezra could feel. Can I help? Maybe, eventually. For now, focus on being the soldier you were meant to be. The truth will come out when it's ready. They sat together in silence as the stars emerged, two warriors bound by events that had shaped both their lives, contemplating futures that remained unwritten. The weeks that followed established new patterns at the Joint Sniper Training Center. Hazel's instructor program drew candidates from across the special operations community, word spreading that something unusual was happening at Camp Pendleton. Something that valued character as much as capability, wisdom as much as skill. Brick completed his 3 months with distinction, returning to the program as a changed man. His teaching style had transformed from dominance to guidance, from intimidation to inspiration. Gaston found his place as well, his experience becoming an asset once he learned to combine it with humility. Clover flourished under direct mentorship, her natural talents refined by instruction that recognized her potential without rushing her development. And Sarah Webb, after intensive counseling and family support, began her own journey toward healing. She visited the training center occasionally, watching Hazel work with new generations of operators, seeing firsthand the legacy her father's sacrifice had helped create. The file folder remained locked in a secure location, its contents awaiting the right moment for revelation. Hazel had shared selected portions with Admiral Crawford and carefully vetted intelligence officials, building the foundation for eventual exposure while protecting against premature action. Justice would come, eventually, when the groundwork was complete and the targets couldn't escape. One evening, as autumn colors began painting the California hills, Hazel stood again at Lane 7. The same position, the same target, the same impossible distance. But everything else had changed. Footsteps approached, multiple. She recognized the cadence without turning. Brick, Gaston, Fern, Ezra, Clover, Otis, even Hugo, visiting from Pentagon duties. They assembled behind her in a line that felt less like formation and more like family. "We thought you might want company," Fern said. "Figured this lane meant something to you," Brick added. "Wanted to be here, if that's okay." Hazel's throat tightened with emotion. She rarely allowed herself to feel. "It's okay." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun descend toward the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "What happens now?" Clover asked quietly. "Now we keep going," Hazel replied. "We train, we teach, we prepare the next generation for challenges we can barely imagine." She paused. "And we remember." "Remember what?" "That every person we meet might be carrying burdens we can't see, fighting battles we don't understand, surviving histories that would break lesser souls." Her voice strengthened with conviction. "We remember that respect isn't something you give to ranks or positions or reputations. It's something you give to people, all people, until they prove they don't deserve it." The words echoed into the fading light. From somewhere distant, a phone rang, Hazel's phone, the same one that had delivered impossible news weeks earlier. She answered without checking the display. "Wraith." Silence, then a voice she didn't recognize. "Master Chief Whitmore, we have information about your former teammate, the one you thought you let escape." "Who is this?" "Someone who shares your interest in truth." A pause pregnant with implication. "He's planning something, something bigger than exposure, something that could destabilize entire regions if it succeeds." "What kind of something?" "The kind that requires Ghost Reaper's best to stop. The real Ghost Reaper, not the corrupted version." Hazel's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm listening. There's a file being delivered to your quarters. Everything you need to know. But, Master Chief, be careful. The people involved in this, they're not amateurs. They're exactly as skilled as you, and considerably less burdened by conscience." "Why tell me this?" "Because some of us still believe in what Ghost Reaper was supposed to be, what it could be again." The voice carried something that sounded almost like hope. "Stop him, Master Chief. Stop what he's planning. And maybe, finally, the ghosts can rest." The line went dead. Hazel lowered the phone slowly, her mind already racing through implications and possibilities. "Trouble?" Fern asked, reading the expression on her face. "Opportunity." Hazel turned to face the assembled group. "How do you all feel about one more mission?" The answers came without hesitation. Brick's determined nod, Gaston's steady affirmation, Fern's fierce grin, Ezra's quiet commitment, even Clover's uncertain but willing acknowledgement. "Then we have work to do." Hazel allowed herself a small smile. "Warriors don't retire, after all. We just find new battles to fight." Above them, the first stars emerged in the darkening sky. Below, the Pacific rolled eternal against California shores. And somewhere between heaven and earth, ghosts stirred with purposes both complete and continuing. Some stories end with resolution. This one ended with beginning, because the best warriors understand that peace isn't an ending. It's just a pause between storms. And the storms, as always, were gathering, were